Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's proactive broadcast. My name is Tiago. I'm here with my colleague, Mohammed. We're going to be speaking about SharePoint framework and DevOps. The main focus is DevOps, but Mohammed's going to mention some stuff about SharePoint framework as well. He's one of our principal developers here at Proactive. He's been working with this for many, many years. And now I'll hand it off to him.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tiago. My name is Mohammed Alha, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm a principal developer in Proactive, and for the last 14 years, I've been working with SharePoint, and my main focus nowadays is towards the front-end DevOps and the cloud-related technologies. Today, we're going to, of course, look at the DevOps part primarily, but we're also going to touch a little bit on the SharePoint framework part as well, because that's also actually driving the web development area as well. So let's take a look what are we going to cover in the agenda today. What is the main goal of the DevOps part, basically? Is it only the industry buzzword, or is it actually something valuable that the tech giants have actually come up with in the last couple of years? We are also going to take a look at what frameworks and libraries, primarily for SharePoint framework, and also it's also going to help in the web development part as well. What are the major players in frameworks and libraries that exist today? Then we are also going to look at primarily for the branching strategy, because that is the base of the DevOps from where we are actually starting. What are the branching strategy exist? What is the reason behind this branching strategy? What we can actually achieve out of that one? And after that, we are going to look at the continuous integration part. That's also a very core component of the DevOps, basically, how to compile your code in an isolated environment, and to make sure that the code is actually integrated properly. Then we are going to also look at the review process as well. That's also the base of the software engineering principles as well, that we are looking at reviewing the code, and some of the things are actually happening using human interventions like peer reviews, some of the things like automated, the testing and all those things. That is the main part of the review process. And after that, we're going to look at what is the continuous delivery, how we can deliver fast to the customer environments, and how we can deliver the quality in a best practice and the best manner way as well. Let's look at the main area, the goals. Why do we need this DevOps thing? How come it's actually came into being in the industry? We want to deliver actually the quality as fast as possible to the customer, the new features, and also reduce the iteration cycles as well as fast as possible, reduce the feedback loop as well, and we also want to deliver as small as possible. Previously, what was happening is that we used to develop, then we have these testing cycles as well, where QA was involved, and of course, the things were going by hand deployments to the environment, sometimes automated. And of course, no one has a clear track of it, and people were involved in all the time. So we try to remove the human intervention as much as possible.
Make it very easy for people to see the changes that have been made and not have to wait a month to see something, right?
Yeah. And we want to keep the process and all of these things associated with it open, so that customer can also involve, take a look, instead of relying on the human resources to take a look, where are we standing? So everyone is involved in this open process as well. And of course, the collaboration is also one of the key part of this DevOps process as well. The technical team is actually looking at each other's code, reviewing, talking to each other, and everything is happening at one place. And customer is also actually looking at the features and things like that. What are the user stories, task breakdowns, and things like that. Everything is happening at one place, so everyone has the full picture. Where are we heading? What are we doing? And how long it's going to take to reach some certain goal as well. So this is the main, actually, the loop of how we are doing the DevOps thing. Basically, we are planning, sprint planning, requirements gathering, task breakdowns, and things like that. Then we are, of course, planning for the continuous build every time we're checking in. Then we are performing in deployment, and before deployment, we're doing some sort of testing and things like that. And then we're also collecting the feedback as well. And of course, during this process, if small things are going as smoothly as possible, the feedback will be fast, and we can have a time to fix things fast and deliver it again.
So you catch errors quick, you fix them quick, and people get
Exactly.
that really
Before waiting
easily.
the whole sprint to finish and actually, wasting time of our resources as well.
Yeah.
So this is actually helps. Uh, and this approach is toward the code focus approach. For example, if I'm working on a project today and I'm making some changes to that one and I move to another project. Now, if some person else comes in, he has to understand not only the code, but also the infrastructure part as well. So this approach, if we have a very strong continuous integration delivery process in place, the focus will be shifted from infrastructure to the code part. That actually helps so that the developer can focus more on the code part instead of on the
job that he was given is
Exactly.
how do I deploy this? Where do I deploy it? And all that. Yeah, that's
so that
really
actually
nice.
helps. Now, if we look at primarily on the SharePoint framework part and libraries, and of course, this is also going to help on the web development and front-end development as well. If we look at the state of SharePoint framework today, Microsoft has shifted towards has taken the modern front-end development and has incorporated into modern SharePoint, the SharePoint Online primarily on that one. Though Microsoft today says that all the front-end frameworks, the modern frameworks, they are actually compatible with SharePoint. But of course, they have chosen React.js. It's very fast, lightweight, and and there's a community behind it.
And it's also what they're using in other products and everything, right?
Exactly.
I think Teams is all written in React, isn't it?
React Native.
Yeah.
But their focus is towards React.js. And of course, if you're starting today, the good idea is that you should also focus on React.js because there's a community behind it. If you have some question, you can easily get answered about those questions in the community. And then Angular is also working because it's a full framework.
Yep.
And they have recently announced Angular elements as well in the version 6. You can incorporate that one, but for that one, you need a huge knowledge about Angular and also on the SharePoint framework as well, so that you can incorporate it.
Okay.
It's a little bit lengthy and long road as compared to the
So if you're getting started, try React first, give it
Exactly.
a go, because you're going to have an easier time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But both are fine, I would say. If you choose Angular or React, it's going to help you increase your competences on the web area as well. Then industry is also moving towards the reactive programming as well. Angular is relying heavily on RxJS.
Yeah.
That is actually a project initiated from Microsoft. But now Google is on the main part of this one in the development and enriching with more features as well. So this is either you're working with any framework or you're not working with framework. This is going to help you with the reactive or asynchronous programming.
Okay.
It's going to help you. Microsoft has also invested heavily on these open source frameworks and libraries as well. The PNP-based JavaScript libraries, they are very popular right now. If you have to fetch the data from SharePoint or communicate with SharePoint, you need to write probably a couple lines of code, for example, if you're fetching data from list. But if you use, for example, PNP, I can guarantee you it will reduce the amount of code 50 to 60%.
Don't need to know too much about SharePoint. It does the heavy lifting for you, all the authentication and everything.
Exactly.
Nice.
And also SharePoint framework and PNP and the web parts, they are written in TypeScript. So PNP is also written in TypeScript. So they are very good, actually very good
Helping each other,
compatibility as well. State management. It's a little bit advanced concept about the state management. But of course, if you're doing a lot of components in a one web part and they're interacting, of course, you have to rely on the state management as well, so that you have a one source of truth from the data is coming, and if the data is changing, all the components are actually reflecting. It's a little bit advanced topic, but of course it's popular in the industry, and it also helps you in the best practices as well.
So it's not that Microsoft's coming up with a bunch of new things, but they're taking things that people are already using today, makes it easier for people to start using it, and they're applying it towards SharePoint. It's cool.
Yeah, and they are also relying on open source quite a lot instead of building things in the house. So the next part is, of course, the testing. Of course, Microsoft has switched towards modern front-end development as well. So, and also the front-end part, the testing is very important. All these frameworks and library, they are relying heavily on that one. Though my SharePoint framework comes with the Mocha inbuilt test runner and the testing framework, but I find the Jest is actually more easy and more easy to configure as well. So it's with minimal configurations, you can achieve quite a lot on that one. But this is just a personal preference.
It's a good tip for people getting started anyway.
So it's a very good thing. And also, it's going to help you in the DevOps process as well, so that you have these sort of gates in place in order to ship the quality in a better way. One thing about the Jest part is that, of course, it's also from the Facebook, and React.js is also from the Facebook. It's not that it's a very compatible thing. Of course, it is. The Jest is just a test runner and suite and assertion libraries built into it. It can work with any framework, Angular and things like that. But just to let you know that it's from the same company. And of course, the PNP PowerShell, it's getting actually huge and huge. There are a lot of new features coming in. We have seen a lot of major shift in the community and in the industry as well, relying on the PNP PowerShell. So it's a very good match between SharePoint Framework and PNP PowerShell, and also in general with SharePoint Online as well. So if you look at the state today, these are the things which you are going to start working with in order to get proper hands-on SharePoint.
So do I have to be really good at using all of these, or?
I think that initially, if you're going to start with SharePoint Framework, you just need a starting point, like, for example, React or SharePoint Framework. And then with the passage of time, you can rely on some of the advanced concepts like state management and Jest. And of course, you need to know a little bit on the PNP PowerShell part as well. In order to get started.
But they have a good base for you to start from, and you can learn from them. And
They have a very good documentation available.
Nice.
Now on the DevOps part, let's take a look what it takes for the DevOps part. This branching strategy is actually heart of it, of the DevOps part. Previously, we know that people have been lazy. They were working directly into the master branch. Someone has made a commit that maybe works on their machine, but everyone else in the team, the compilation is broken or something like that. So the branching strategy with the introduction of Git, the branching strategy is very, very important right now, is that so that you can protect your master branch so that the faulty code does not get into the master branch.
So the branching strategy is how you organize your code, how you protect the different changes you're making, make sure that people are working only on the things that are relevant for that version.
We need to make sure that master branch is protected, and people are working in their isolated different feature branches. And when we have gone through all the testing and review and things like that, and when it's the process that's actually around it, it verifies that things are in place, then we take that code to the master branch. So we introduce a process around it, and this is the first part of that process. There are very popular branching strategies available in the market today, but there are three very popular ones. One is the Git flow. That's very famous in the industry right now. It has two long-lived branches. You have develop branch, you have the master branch. You are always working on the develop branch, and then there is a process around how to take from the development branch and to release and hot fixes and things like that. This is actually for our large-scale projects or products where we have to maintain different versioning as well. And also, if you have a lot of junior developers, it's a good idea to place this kind of a process around it.
So has more safety nets around it.
Exactly. True. That's true. Then there's another one which Microsoft has come up with that's called Microsoft Release Flow. That's actually little bit less complicated as compared to the Git flow. It's Asia DevOps team is actually using it, and they are relying heavily on this one. They're shipping their releases every 3 weeks based on this branching strategy.
You know it works.
Yeah. So this is also for large scale things as well, and also for the medium or small as well. Then there is a very simple one that's called GitHub Flow. It's actually there's only one long-lived branch, master branch, and you branch out from that one. And when you have tested your things and it's working fine, during the review process, we perform a deployment to the environment and everything works. Then we merge the code into the master. Otherwise, we take the previous deployment and deploy it to the environment so that we can roll back.
Okay.
So this is for the medium to small scale projects and ongoing. It's not good for product based solutions. And also, it's if you have a senior developers in your team, it makes sense to introduce this one to deliver things fast.
So it has less bureaucracy, but
Exactly.
you also run some risks.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
And the next part is the continuous integration part. That is every time you commit your changes to the code. Of course, we rely on our developer machine as well. We always say that it works on my machine, but there are highly chances that something or some dependency exists on your machine that maybe does not exist on other developers' machine. So we need to make sure that every time we're committing changes, the code is actually compilable in an isolated, clean environment, so that we know that code is actually properly compilable and not relying on any other external dependency or something that exists on my machine, basically.
Okay.
So let's go through the what are the steps required for the continuous integration process as well. Some of the things are very generic, but of course, in the nature of the project as well, it changes.
Sure.
But for example, if you're working on .NET-based project with Nuggets and Node and things like that. So the first step is always that you need to basically restore the dependencies. You need to make sure that the code is compilable, building, and you are producing the artifacts out of that one. And you are also performing, for example, unit testing or integration testing. You collect the reports. Then, to some extent, maybe you are introducing the code coverage as well, that how much your code is actually touched during the unit test part.
Okay.
And you have defined some threshold. For example, it depends on the nature of the project as well. For example, we say that 70%, and if it's going down, someone needs to investigate it, why it's going down, and so that it is going to stop the merging of the code.
Okay, so the first part, the branching, you control how you organize your code, and then the next step with the continuous integration, you make sure that all the parts still fit together, you didn't break anything.
Exactly.
And then you have the automated tests to help you measure that.
Exactly.
Right, cool.
Next process is that, for example, if you have finished your task, a feature you have been working on, now it's ready. But it still exists in your separate isolated branch. It's not part of your main master branch where you are probably performing a deployment from. So now comes the pull request in terms of DevOps process, but let's call it a review process. There are some automated parts of the process, and some of them are actually human interventions involved in that one. We always start with a work item attachment, that there should be a reason why this change has been introduced. Either are you branching from the user story, or, for example, a task that we can backtrack it, why we are committing these code changes to that one. There should be a minimum number of reviewers in your team. Microsoft recommends that there needs to be 2 reviewers as part of your pull request process. There needs to be a build attached to that one, a build that has more unit tests, because that takes maybe longer time as compared to your only compilable builds.
Okay.
And there also needs to be, if someone finds out there is a reason that this should not be introduced, this change, there should be a discussion as well, that if you're using Asia DevOps or any other DevOps tool, probably you'll find that they have these discussion boards as well.
So when someone says they're done, you ran all these tests and everything, you're having the review process. So it can run inside Azure DevOps, and you have a place there to make comments, ask questions. And
Exactly. It's very powerful, and it really helps.
Nice.
So now let's take a look. For example, the review process has been done, and now the code has been merged to the master branch, and we have triggered that every time there will be a deployment, it should happen from the master branch, for example. So now let's take a look where we have left on the continuous integration part, that we have artifact ready, a package ready to be deployed to the environment. So we will take, these are the steps for the continuous delivery, that the artifact needs to be attached, and there needs to be a deployment script ready. Deployment script means that if you're performing a deployment just like from your machine, probably you are relying on some sort of a scripts today. And people think that the continuous delivery or this integration process is really hard. It's very, very simple if you know what steps to include, basically. It's the same step which you are doing on your machine in an isolated environment. So we need to make sure the deployment scripts are ready. For example, if we're talking about SharePoint Online, we need to know that PowerShell PnP and things like that are actually available during the deployment process. Then we perform the actual deployment of an artifact. And after that, for example, if there's a very complicated or business critical component, and we are going to run some automated UI test on that one, we need to make sure that those are actually happening before we proceed to another critical environment, so we can catch it as early as possible. And then the approvals and gates mechanism, for example, if we're looking at Azure DevOps, they are very good, actually. Some of them are automated processes involved. If you're, for example, someone has to approve from your team or from the customer, and that it needs to be deployed to the next environment. Or maybe we have application insights, for example, telemetry we are collecting, that there is no exception happening on the previous environment, so that we can go to the next environment. For example, things like that.
And don't these things add up to too much time to make a task? Or
if you're setting it up, you need to know what you're doing. But of course, normally for the business critical system, there needs to be a delay based on agreement with the business as well, that if the new feature is coming in, that how long you have to wait for it goes to the next. If we do it, you know, as soon as possible,
or have to follow a handwritten script, might take, might seem faster, but you spend more time doing it over and over. So it's good to have it automated.
Exactly. Now let's take a look on the, for example, we are running, we are starting from the work item.
Okay.
So this is an example of an user story, and we have branched out from, we have created a branch for the project based on this user story, that this is the feature we are going to develop.
So inside DevOps, this is the change that the developer needs to implement. This is how you document it.
So developer needs to know that there needs to be a work item, a user story already in place. And you can see on the right side that how many commits and pull requests are actually attached with this one. And also the subtasks as well. So from this page, I can also take a look what is happening on the code, how many commits are actually happen against this work item.
Get the whole history, you know, why why things were done.
Yeah, for backtracking. That's very actually helpful. This is an example of one of the web parts, and this is in Azure DevOps, and it's under the Git source control. System that's very popular, and people are moving away right now from Team Foundation version control, and Microsoft is also pushing heavily on this part as well. And we try to make sure that isolated components should exist in one Git repository. Not everything should be placed in one Git repository, otherwise it's difficult, because we are saying that it needs to be shipped as small as possible. Otherwise, if we're shipping everything and touching those things which we have not touched in the code part, they're also getting deployed as well.
Okay.
So it makes sense to isolate components in an isolated Git repositories.
All right.
This is one of the example of the successful continuous integration part. You can see that the deployment we can also see from here as well, and also the associated changes as well. And this is an example of the continuous delivery, that from the environment, I can see that what is the release number of the environment, and Also, we can see that how many commits are actually deployed as part of this release.
Yeah. And also the files that were included and all of that.
If you want to go for artifacts, you need to go back.
Okay,
What package has been
all right.
deployed on the continuous integration
Okay.
part. So, yeah. Some of the areas, because we have just touched the very basics and overview as well, the build pipeline, where we are compiling and checking and unit testing and all those things, that can also be defined in UI as well, but that can also be defined as part of your code so that you can backtrack the history. And if you want to introduce more changes, you do not disturb other people who are working in their own branches as well. And good idea to introduce the application insights so that you get first-hand information about the exceptions, so that customer is not calling you that this is breaking or something, and you have the full history of the exception as well. And you also mark, when you're performing a deployment, you also mark a point in application insight so that you know that if an exception is it happening before the release or after the release, so that you can narrow down where actually the problem lies. And it's a good idea that you rely on artifacts and feeds that exist in Azure DevOps, so that if you have a common NPM package or common NuGet package, so that you can distribute it in your company through the feeds instead of delivering public. Yeah.
So that's splitting, keeping the code
exactly.
Isolated. You reuse that in other products or other projects and everything.
Exactly, because this is not an open source stuff we are talking about. It's an in-house and customer stuff, so we want it to be private instead of publishing it to the public feeds. And if we're talking about private packages, it's a good idea that you should place it on some CDN. I prefer Azure CDN as well for reusable JavaScript libraries and things like that.
Okay.
That was it for the Azure DevOps part. If there's more questions or...
Yeah, should have mentioned earlier, but I am monitoring the questions. If anyone watching has any questions, you can send it in and I'll pass them along. Otherwise, tomorrow we'll be having another webcast. You guys are welcome to join us. And I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.